Welcome to The Explainer. We are jumping right in today with a really fascinating whiteboard-style breakdown of a massive issue facing our local communities. We're looking at how seemingly small, disjointed local taxes and fees end up compounding into these unmanageable financial burdens for all of us. If you've ever stared at your local tax bill and wondered, how on earth did it get this high when I only consciously voted for a few minor things, well, you're definitely in the right place. We're unpacking a great piece of source material today called Taxation Without Destination, which shows us the hidden mechanics of city budgets and, more importantly, how citizens actually hold the ultimate power to fix them. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with a truly brilliant analogy from our source material. Picture this: a school district and a rail district walk into a local bar. Each one generously buys a round of drinks. Then they buy you a round. It feels pretty great, right? Well, until you realize that the bartender is adding up the tab, and he's literally the only one who does. These municipal districts are essentially patrons buying rounds on your personal bar tab, and by the end of the night, you are the one left holding this massive bill.
Because here's what happens. Every bureaucratic entity sidles up to the bar and asks for just a little bit. The school district wants a bond, the rail district wants a commuter line, then home builder regulations get quietly tacked on, and out of nowhere, an unexpected property tax reassessment pulls up a stool and orders top-shelf liquor. Every single one of these entities asks for a little and a little and a little more. Slowly but surely, they quietly stack the overall cost until it becomes a completely unmanageable bill for the taxpayer. And the trick is, none of them ever ask you for the whole tab at once.
To put that into perspective, let's look at a specific example from our source. A local school district, District 11, wants to ask taxpayers for a staggering $775 million. But they don't market it to you as $775 million. No way. They pitch it as just $6.50 a month per $100,000 of your home's value. They sell it to you as the price of a fancy coffee. But when you zoom out and add up the total cost, that is one incredibly expensive cup of coffee. And they get away with this specifically because of how our local governments are structured.
The root of this compounding debt problem is something called a silo. A silo is basically just an isolated bureaucratic department. And the critical issue here, according to the source, is that the right silo has absolutely no idea what the left silo is doing. They operate completely independently. They never actually communicate about the cumulative financial weight they're placing on the community as a whole.
And you know what's really wild? It's how these silos evaluate themselves. The school district measures schools. The rail district measures trains. The library district measures libraries. Every single silo is grading its own paper. And, surprise, surprise, every silo gives itself a blue ribbon. They all deem their own projects absolutely essential. But here's the devastating casualty of this system. Absolutely nobody is responsible for measuring the combined true cost being dropped onto your house.
Section 1. 30-year debt traps. The school bond.
The source author uses a highly relatable analogy for this. Think about financing a family minivan through the kids' swim team years. I mean, would you finance a minivan for 30 years? Of course not. The kids eventually grow up and move out, but that payment would just keep ticking like a fine watch. From a real estate perspective, taking out a 30-year note on school buildings is the exact same thing. Sure, the physical brick doesn't expire, but the assumption that hundreds of kids will walk through those specific doors every day for the next 30 years, that absolutely might. So why finance a building for 30 years if its practical lifespan for that specific population could be obsolete in 15?
Well, they do it to artificially lower the monthly payment down to that $6.50 fancy coffee pitch we talked about earlier, which just makes it an easier sell to voters. But actually, when you run the shocking math on this, stretching a $775 million bond over 30 years means the interest alone comes to over $800 million. The interest actually ends up costing the taxpayers more than the physical buildings themselves. Let that sink in.
Now, the defense these silos often use for these massive long loan terms is a concept called intergenerational equity. The general idea is that the kids sitting in that building in the year 2050 should help pay off the debt today. But as the source points out, this is essentially making your grandchildren unasked co-signers on a massive loan. Plus, it assumes that specific building will even still be operating in 2050. If it closes early, that future co-signer is paying off a benefit they never even received.
Section 2. The Fun Bus and Hidden Bureaucracy.
Let's look at another example and contrast two different train routes to see how a proposed commuter rail district operates. So the north route is getting built with existing funds. No new tax required. Awesome. But the south route? That one requires a brand new perpetual tax of 1/3% on nearly everything purchased within 5 miles of a station. And the kicker here? The district's own directors admit this south route isn't even for commuting to work or school. Surveys show it's for ball games, college visits, and evening shows. The source aptly labels it a fun bus, subsidized by a perpetual, inescapable tax.
Then there's the hidden bureaucracy. This is the silo that silently adds roughly $130,000 to the cost of an average new house. According to a homebuilder study cited in our source, government regulations at every level tack this massive figure onto housing costs before a shovel even hits the dirt. Nobody campaigned for that number. You didn't see any yard signs for it. At least a tax has the manners to appear on a ballot, right? This regulation is just added directly to your tab without a single word.
So here is the absolutely crucial point. When these independent silos arrive, one at a time, to pitch their very reasonable-sounding projects, they never have to answer the single most important question in municipal budgeting. And that question is, compared to what?
This brings us to what the source calls the missing yardstick. Because cities often fail to set a unified goal, like, say, declaring, "We intend to become the safest city in America," there is absolutely nothing to measure these asks against. If you have a yardstick, you can force the school district, the rail district, and the police department to actually compete, proving which project buys the most safety per dollar. But without that unified yardstick, the loudest ask wins, the quietest ask waits, and the taxpayer goes broke.
Section 3. Taking back the tab. You are the aggregator.
So, how do we fix this? How do citizens actually take control of city budgets? Here is the step-by-step roadmap. First, the community establishes that unified goal, your yardstick. Second, you force every single silo to prove their worth against that yardstick. You make the school district prove that $775 million in new windows buys more safety than, say, more police officers or better roads or improved reading levels. And finally, step 3, you use the ballot box to enforce it.
This is truly the most empowering takeaway from the source material. You, the taxpayer, are the only party who gets all the bills. There's no municipal committee out there losing sleep over the total tab. You are the ultimate aggregator. The ballot box is literally the only place in the entire system where these isolated, siloed asks ever sit in the same room, which means the power to apply the yardstick and to just say no to bad proposals rests entirely in your hands.
Now listen, saying no to bad tabs doesn't mean saying no to everything. The source gives a great example of what a good proposal looks like: a new data center. It leverages a one-time use tax of roughly $115 million to fund police, parks, and potholes. And it generates $6 to $8 million annually, forever, off an old, unused site. And best of all, nobody's personal bar tab goes up. It's a project that sets money on the bar instead of adding to your tab. The only catch is that the city must endow that ongoing revenue so it isn't just wasted in a single budget cycle.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. The overarching theme of this explainer is a clear warning against taxation without destination. As long as these silos operate blindly, every new ask is just one more round on a tab nobody reads. But now, you know the mechanics. You know exactly how the tab gets inflated, and more importantly, you know that you hold the ultimate yardstick. So the next time election season rolls around and the silos start asking to buy around, how will you use your power as the ultimate aggregator at the ballot box? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep paying attention, stay informed, and use your yardstick. Catch you next time.